So James is back as our moderator tonight. Hi, James.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, here I am. If we don't have any announcements, I'll jump right into it. But without further ado, let's get into our presentation tonight. Our presentation will be by Kyle Roslund. And Kyle is a geologist with a deep passion for pollinator education and advocacy, particularly focused on native bees. With a diverse background spanning consulting, nonprofit work, and agriculture, he brings a wealth of experience to his efforts. An avid gardener, Kyle is gradually transforming his yard into a haven of native plants, reflecting his commitment to creating sustainable ecosystems. Kyle, without further ado, let's get into it.
Yeah, so um, thanks for the introduction. My name is Kyle. I am down in the Vancouver area. I've been a part of the Bee Atlas for a couple of years and a member of the Native Bee Society for the last few years. And then in 2020, was part of a group that started a nonprofit in Clark County that was based around pollinator education and advocacy. And we had a specific mission to make and keep Vancouver a bee city. And so this is kind of our story. Everybody's journey is different. I'm going to throw out some ideas and let folks know, some of the things that we went through and some of the lessons learned that we had. Everybody's journey is different. Everybody's situation is different. Some cities, it's very easy to do this in. Other places, it's more difficult. Vancouver was difficult. It took us about 4 years to make Vancouver a bee city. There are reasons for that, and I'll go through those. But it is an somewhat interesting story, I think. So we're just going to talk about a few things. We'll talk about why Bee City. We'll go through what the commitments are because I think it's good to refresh memories on why the commitments are there and what the benefits are. A little bit about our beginning in Vancouver. Spoiler alert: we're going to talk about building partnerships because that was a big part of Vancouver becoming a Bee City, and then we'll just go through a few strategies and lessons learned. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about population because Vancouver is kind of in a weird place population-wise. These are the 10 biggest cities by population in Washington, and only two of these cities are bee cities. So there's a lot of opportunity in Washington to be a bee city, especially in these large population centers. When we jump into the Clark County statistics, Vancouver's about 200,000 folks. All these places that are highlighted, though, are within Vancouver's urban growth boundary. They're unincorporated parts of Clark County. And so when you start adding those up, you end up with a population of the greater Vancouver area, not including Portland, of about 300,000 people. And so there's just a lot of people here. And we have this immense urban growth boundary. Here's a map of that. Vancouver is really limited to the east and to the west and to the south, right? We have the Columbia River we're bounded by on the south. On the east side, we have Camas, city of Camas. So really, Vancouver's sprawls to the north, and it's into all of these unincorporated portions of Clark County. So, why would I bring these statistics up? Well, first of all, there's a lot of opportunity in Washington State for more bee campuses and cities, but Vancouver is a large, unwieldy city. There's a lot of bureaucracy, and that was really a big part of why we took so long to become a bee city. The bureaucracy in Vancouver was really the single largest hurdle that we had at making Vancouver a bee city, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It took us 4 years to get there. Some of that was that there was a lack of public outreach and education on the topic. Some of it was that there was lack of political support, and so we had to generate that. We had to show that there was support. We had some city councilors who were very pro being a bee city, and we had some that didn't really care that much. They didn't really see the political value to it, and it took us some time to build that knowledge base. So we took our time. We had to show our value. We had to bring people along with us. We had to create partnerships, and it was some work. And as Vancouver saddled with all this bureaucracy, we also have a population that's somewhat apathetic about these things. And the perception of people not caring about the environment and about some of these things was a bit of a hurdle. And so we had to work towards that. But over time, we did find that there were people who were interested in things like pesticide reduction, mason bees, student outreach, all of those things. It just took time to find those people, and that was part of our journey. So just a little background on Bee City in general. There's about 250 city affiliates. There's another 225 or so campuses. So they're pushing about 500 bee cities and bee campuses across the country. So it's a pretty, it's grown a lot since we started doing this 4 years ago. Here's a map of Washington itself, and this gives you a sense of how much growth potential there is in Washington. The I-5 corridor has some locations. There's some schools out there, and this is actually a list provided by Xerces, and this is kind of where we're at currently. There's only 13 affiliates in Washington, 6 colleges and 7 cities, so there's a ton of room for growth. Also a reminder, counties and port districts can also become bee cities. So if you're working with your city and you're struggling, know that there's other opportunities. You could maybe work with your county instead of your city. You could work with a port district. Maybe you have a community college in your area. You could work with all those people to become bee cities, because Xerces doesn't care. They're happy to let those folks get certified to be a bee city or a bee campus. But we're lucky in Vancouver in that we had Clark College, who had also become a bee campus while we were in the process of becoming a bee city. So that's also part of our story. But, at the beginning of all of this, the information we were putting out there was pretty similar to what most people talk about. Why is this important? Well, plants need pollinators. Our food system needs pollinators. Food is a big multi-billion-dollar industry. Pollinators are in decline. Like, all these things are super important. Honeybees have been dying off. Bumblebees are stressed. And so a lot of the normal kinds of things. The nice thing about working with Xerces is they give you a lot of resources, a lot of access to resources. So the next few slides that I have here are just slides that Xerces will provide you. They'll help you with presentations. If you need to go talk to your councils or to other committees, they'll give you resources and they'll help you with that. And a big part of the messaging on Bee City is really surrounding around, it's not so much save the bees, but it's more, rethinking your ecosystem. Pollinators are ecosystem indicators. Native bees are really important for those ecosystems. Native bee biodiversity is also really important. Cities can play an important role in native biodiversity. Urban landscapes are often overlooked, but they're actually an opportunity for these things, not a limitation. So Xerces does a good job with their messaging, and they share a lot of these things with you. Here's their slides on food production, same thing. There's a lot of value here for pollinators, and they like to help people understand that, because there's a monetary value to pollinators, right? And some people think in those terms, so it's good to have some information on that. Also, ecological roles, super important for food webs. Pollinators are keystone species in almost all ecosystems, and really enable the growth of fruits and seeds, and then help create that whole system of the complex food webs that we need in order to survive. So lots of good stuff here. Pollinators are in trouble. That's obviously a known thing. Lots of studies out there globally on that, and Xerces does a good job of giving you access to that. There's also, biodiversity, right? And pollinator declines. They're all related. So, 40% of pollinators are at risk. And again, Xerces gives you some good information on that. They also talk about honeybees. Honeybees are an integral part to our food system, but the European honeybee was introduced here in the 1600s with colonialism. It's not native to North America. And there are problems that come with honeybees, and they give you some good information on how to talk to people about honeybees, because most people, that's kind of their starting point with these insects. I like information to throw out there like this. Saving native songbird. You wouldn't keep chickens to save native songbirds. You wouldn't keep bees to save native bees, right? And so trying to just come up with creative ways to talk about those things in front of decision makers and things like that. Beekeeping is a great hobby. It can be a business, but it's not the same thing as conserving native pollinators. And so it's really good to make that clear. Being a bee city, though, you have the choice to include honeybee education, honeybee things. That's totally up to you. You can totally include honeybees, but Xerces is pretty careful to mention that beekeeping is separate from bee conservation. I always like to keep up with what's going on in the news, and this was an interesting article that was in the Washington Post recently. And the messaging's great, right? We saved the wrong bees, but so I got really excited to read this, and you jump into it and you find out that every article that there's, every data that they're sourcing is like 5 to 10 years old. So this isn't new stuff. This is stuff that's been going on for a long time. This article came out 2 weeks ago, but it's sourcing data that's 10 years old. So always good to check those data sources. Xerces also likes to give you a lot of good information about the drivers of pollinator decline. Habitat loss is a huge one. Pesticide use is a huge one. Diseases and pathogens, super important. And then, of course, climate change. This figure, though, when we're talking about these things, just because it's kind of busy, but it really gets at a lot of the problems that we're facing. It truly is death by 1,000 cuts. Things like habitat loss, nesting site loss, forage loss, those are all really important, but so are fires and climate change and storm intensity and insecticide use and agricultural intensification, all the things that go into this. And the daily things that humans do really do impact insects a lot. And I don't think people really take that into account when they're making decisions. So I like things like this. We're also lucky down here in Southwest Washington to have a backyard habitat certification program, and it really dives into the whole thought of like, does 1 yard matter from that kind of Doug Tallamy perspective? Does 1 yard matter? And I think it really does. Small spaces add up, pollinator corridors appear, insects really benefit from these things. Urban spaces are way more critical to diversity than what folks think, and they're really good habitat that's been discounted in the past. So you can imagine all these green areas merging together to create these pollinator corridors to have a lot of benefit. And so cities are important for this, and that's why Bee City is important. So there's a lot of commitments. Well, there's a few commitments. I wouldn't say there is a lot. You have to do, if you're going to be a Bee City, you have to do 1 pollinator habitat project per year. You have to do 1 outreach project per year, and that outreach project could be the same project that you do your habitat with. You have to do some signage and some websites to acknowledge that you're part of a Bee City. You have to provide plant lists and vendors for native plants. Your city needs to operate under an integrated pest management plan, and you have to administer the program. So all pretty straightforward stuff. There's a ton of benefits to being a Bee City. We don't have to go into all of these things, but it is good when you're talking to stakeholders and to decision makers about pointing out the benefits, because that's really one of the big selling points for them. So as far as commitments go, you have this application process, you pay an annual fee, you have to get a resolution by your city council. And that was really a big hurdle for us, was getting to the point where we could even ask them to sign a resolution, because we had to get a lot of things in place first. You have to find a city department to sponsor the Bee City status, and you have to have a committee that kind of oversees and guides a lot of the Bee City activities that happen. You commit to doing that habitat project once per year and doing outreach once per year. You have to operate under an integrated pest management plan. It's kind of a buzzword. Not everybody knows what that means. So I think there's some education that goes into IPM and what that all means. And then you have to do an annual report with a renewal fee. Large cities pay about $500, smaller cities pay less. It's not a huge fee, but there is a fee. Xerces gives you this really nice website that you can go into, download things, upload things. You do all of your reporting through this. It's pretty easy to manage. You pay your fees through here. And they also have a lot of other just free resources out there that are completely accessible to the public. Take advantage of it. They have a lot of good messaging. They have a ton of resources. It's all good stuff, good resources for sure. So take advantage of Xerces. They're there. They want you to succeed. Check out their resources. So you have to establish this committee. In Vancouver, it took us a while to even figure out how to do this, because we have a subcommittee that is within a different department than the group that manages and administers the program. But that was how we decided to do it for various reasons. We have a subcommittee with about 12 members from various industry and walks of life. Vancouver, like I said, lots of layers of bureaucracy. We have an urban forestry commission. We have a parks, rec, and cultural services commission. We have a number of other, transportation, all kinds of things. We decided to operate our committee under the Urban Forestry Commission, mainly because that was the only commission that can set up subcommittees. And it was really kind of a big deal to have the city create a brand new committee for pollinators because some of their rules and charter didn't allow for that. But the Urban Forestry Commission could do that. And so we have our pollinator subcommittee there. We're also lucky to have this program called Nature Spaces in Vancouver, and they operate under the Parks department, and they are responsible for planting native plants and in parks and public spaces. And so we have a program in Vancouver that was already planting a lot of native plants, and so they became the administering group for Bee City in Vancouver. We also decided that we wanted nonprofit and expert support, so we have folks from a couple of nonprofits, Vancouver Bee Project being one of them, Lower Columbia Nature Network, and then we have some kind of regional experts like Michael O'Loughlin from Clark Public Utilities sits on our committee to provide just expert information and help us, move things forward. As far as habitat goes, Xerces really wants you to create and enhance pollinator habitat on public and private land, and then they want you to track that somehow so that you can use it in their reporting scheme. We just use simple reporting web forms through our Bee City website for people to self-report. There's a number of ways you could do that, but that seemed like the easiest way to do it. So people just self-report when they create new or enhance existing habitat, and then we track that and use it in our reporting. Another one of the commitments you have to provide is you have to have these native plant lists. And in the Vancouver metro region, we're lucky we have this thing called the Portland plant list. We already have a list of native plants, but Department of Agriculture has also put together their pollinator forage list. It's a downloadable Excel file. You can search by county, and you can create lists very easily of native plants that are native to your county. So Department of Ag has already done the work for you. You just have to create a list from the lists that they've created already. Pretty easy. The pesticide reduction portion and the IPM plan stuff was not a huge hurdle for Vancouver because we already had an integrated pest management plan. We needed to update it though. It was old, it was a large plan, it was pretty unusable. And so the city actually spent a lot of time on the lead up to becoming a Bee City of updating that plan, making a more usable document and just updating it. It hadn't been updated for about 20 years, and it was time. Xerces has a lot of resources to help you with IPM plans. They will review your IPM plan. They will give you feedback. So there's a lot of good free resources when it comes to IPM for your city and your organization. Outreach and education, Vancouver is already doing this. We saw becoming a Bee City as really an opportunity to, celebrate the work that was already happening. Being a Bee City means that you need to provide events and you need to educate the community. We're already doing that. Vancouver already had dozens of events per year doing this, planting native plants, doing the work. We had the Nature Spaces program. They were already doing that work. Vancouver Bee Project also helped with that work. So lots of good, easy stuff there that we're already doing. We also started including a pollinator festival every year, which some of you have been to, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then you have to publicly acknowledge that you're a Bee City. So you have to put out signs, and you have to have a website. In Vancouver, we actually host that website on the Vancouver Bee Project website, but you can do it any number of ways. Xerces doesn't care. It can be on the city's website. It can be a partner who hosts the website. And Xerces has templates to use for signs. You can design your own sign. You can use their template. They don't care. It's up to you. And then you have to report and do this annual renewal fee. The reporting is very easy. It's through that web portal that I showed you earlier. It's not that difficult. You have to track some new habitat and provide all that data to them. The reporting is not difficult. they want the fee and they want to know some numbers so that they can use it for their greater reporting. So that's kind of my little spiel about Bee City. It feels like a lot of stuff, but if you break it down into components, it's not a lot. It's all pretty approachable stuff. However, bureaucratic Vancouver made it a lot harder than it needed to be, because we felt like we really had to figure all these things out before we even took Bee City to City Council. And so that was a big part of why it took us 4 years to do it, was because we had folks who felt like we had to figure all of these things out before we actually became a Bee City. That's not traditionally how a lot of cities do it. A lot of cities become a Bee City and then they kind of figure out how to do these other things as time goes on. Vancouver did it the other way, and that was another hurdle that we had. So I'll talk a little bit about the beginning of this. Back in about 2020, the pandemic had started. I personally was out in the community a lot more. I was walking around, riding bike. And if you've lived in Washington very long, you probably have seen these pesticide application placards. By law, you're supposed to post placards if you're going to spray in a public space. My sister-in-law and I would walk around during the pandemic quite a bit, and we'd walk past the school where her kids go to school, and we would see these things and just get infuriated by, why do they have to spray this stuff? What's going on? Or better yet, why are they spraying this week when school ends next week and they could just wait another week to spray, and then there's no kids there? Like, what's the driver to do this? So for me personally, a big driver of the Bee City initiative, and for a lot of the things that Vancouver's doing for pollinators, really comes from my disgust for pesticide use. On top of that, we had a lot of cool things happening locally. Clark College became a bee campus at about the same time we started working with the city to become a Bee City. We had something to point to. We had something to say, look, these guys are doing this. They put in 3 acres of pollinator meadow. How cool is that? The city could do the same thing. So we had an example to show folks, and I think that was a really helpful thing for us. In tandem with that, we also had Clark Public Utilities and their pollinator project. And so Clark Public Utilities was installing native plants and pollinator habitat on all of their properties throughout the county. And we had another example of really cool, really nicely well done, well thought out things to point to and say, look, there's people doing this in the community already. People care about this. Here's some great things that are happening. And I can't say enough good things about Clark Public Utilities. They've really done a fabulous job in Southwest Washington of creating a lot of pollinator habitat. So we had some nice things to point to and use as examples. And then the other thing for me personally is, and you probably have experienced this if you live in town somewhere, there's this really ugly median strip down the street from my house. And I look at it every day. I still look at it every day. It looks very different than this, but it was one of these places where it just got sprayed all the time. There weren't many native plants. It looked bad. There were abandoned political signs there constantly, just a really ugly space. And I was that weirdo who would email the city and say, let's do something about this. What can we do about it? And let's plant native plants. Let's take care of it. Let's change it. And a lot of the messages that I got back was, well, we'd like to do that, but we need to partner with a nonprofit in order to move things like that forward. And having just individual citizens interested in doing that isn't good enough in the city of Vancouver. They'd had good luck partnering with nonprofits to move initiatives forward and make things happen. And so that was when, at the beginning of the pandemic, along with a lot of the other things that I've talked about, that was when everything kind of clicked. That's when everything kind of came together, and it's like, okay, well, if we need to make a nonprofit in order to make this happen, then that's exactly what we're going to do. And so in 2020, we started the Vancouver Bee Project, me and a group of friends, focusing on pollinator education, advocacy, and habitat creation. And we do a lot of things. We tried a lot of things that failed. We threw a lot of things at the wall trying to figure out what would stick. I won't jump into all of the things that we do because it's quite a bit, but we do put on a pollinator festival. We try to talk about ways to grow natives. But a big part of our advocacy mission is to make Vancouver a bee city, period, and keep that designation. And so we decided to do a nonprofit around this. That's not a direction everybody needs to go in, but that's the direction that Vancouver had to go in order for Bee City to happen in Vancouver. I wouldn't recommend it for a lot of folks. In smaller towns, you definitely don't need it. But in Vancouver, it was the only way that it was going to happen. So that was a big reason why we started the nonprofit. Here's just a little map of what happened from about 2020 until today. There are a lot of things happening at the state level. There are a lot of things happening at the local level. The city was really trying to boost their volunteer engagement. They also had a climate action framework that they were working on. They were updating their comprehensive plan. So the city was doing a lot of things. None of those things were really taking pollinators into account, though. And so we realized pretty quickly that the nonprofit could get their fingers in that and start helping the city, with their messaging on pollinators and making sure that they're talking about native plants and pollinators. At the statewide level, the Pollinator Health Task Force came around in the early 2020s, creating lots of good legislative movement there. And so there were things happening that were, far out of our city's control, but there were things that we could point to and say, look, people care about this stuff. People want to do better. Here's some examples. Let's do better. And so in early 2021, Vancouver Bee Project was formed, late 2020, 2021. And we were able to try and push some things together. That city program that did a lot of the native plantings in parks and public spaces, they were also young at that point. Clark Public Utilities had the first pollinator festival in Clark County in 2023. That was a big movement forward for a lot of what we were doing. The city then made that pilot program of nature spaces into just a full-blown program and funded it and had employees to fund in order to plant native plants around the city. And that was a huge thing. That was a huge thing because it meant that there were city employees invested in planting native plants and pollinator habitat in the city. And that was really awesome. So lots of good things that happened over the last 5 years. And a big part of having this nonprofit was that we could provide a lot of outreach and habitat and really check a lot of those boxes for the city to say that, hey, we're already doing these things to be a bee city anyway. And so we provided a lot of opportunity. We continue to provide a lot of opportunity. We have tons of volunteers, excellent, amazing volunteers. There's some people on this call who volunteer with us, like so many great volunteers moving initiatives forward. It's super important. So one of the things that we did early on, though, is we knew we needed to have a committee. We knew that we wanted to make Vancouver a bee city. The city wasn't at the table yet, so we just made our own committee, and we met regularly and called it a committee, Bee City Committee, even though that really wasn't what it was. It was just a group of bee people getting together, and we used it as an opportunity to teach each other stuff about what it means to be a bee city. So we'd bring in some local experts to talk about pollinator education. We talked about IPM plans and what they mean and how they work. We brought in some experts on pesticide education and backyard habitat certifications, all that stuff. And we use it as an opportunity to build community and get to know people in the community who are interested and engaged in these things. And it worked out really well, but it literally was us just making stuff up and like, hey, we're going to have this thing. We're going to call it a Bee City Committee. Even though we're not there yet with the city, let's do it. And we had city councilors show up to these things. We had city staff show up to these things occasionally. So it was a really good way to show people like, hey, there's interest in this. Let's continue to talk about it. From an advocacy perspective, we did a change.org petition. And the reason we did that was because the city, for some reason, listens to change.org petitions. It's not something that I would have guessed that they would have cared about, but we started a change.org petition to make Vancouver a bee city. We had a couple thousand people sign it. We had something to point to, though, and say, look, we have signatures on this petition. People want this to be a thing. Let's make it a thing. And so it gave us something tangible to point to. We made partnerships, lots and lots and lots of partnerships. That was really key to all of this. We had to figure out ways to engage with council and with some of these commissioners on the Urban Forestry Commission. And Parks and Rec Commission. The nice thing was that once we started engaging with those commissioners, they were immediately on our side and they wanted Vancouver to be a bee city. And so that just created an army of people out there bugging city council about, hey, we want Vancouver to be a bee city. Why aren't we a bee city? Let's talk about it. Let's make it happen. So we were able to kind of generate some additional buzz that way. A really important thing was to find a city champion. Somebody at the city has to administer all of this, and you need to find somebody within your city government who's willing to do that. And that takes some time sometimes. I know we talked to some cities as we were gearing up for this, and for some of them it was really easy. There were people who were interested and engaged and willing to do this. For others, not so much. And so you're going to have to find somebody within government who's willing to champion these things. It's pretty important. From a habitat perspective, like I said, Vancouver is already doing a lot of cool things. One big opportunity that we had, though, is there's a lot of people who plant trees in Vancouver, and we found very quickly that we could come to those tree planting events with native pollinator plants, forbs, typically, Douglas aster, yarrow, things like that, and do tree co-planting. So every time they put a tree in the ground, we put 2 or 3 pollinator plants in with it. Those plants had a huge success rate because those trees get watered for the first 3 years that they're planted. So, planting native plants along with those trees has worked out really well for us. It was a pretty inexpensive way to get our name out there and to get a lot of pollinator plants out into the world. We also host a free native plant and seed library in the fall, and that's where we take grant funding and we are able to purchase native plants, and then we give them away for free to property owners, renters, anybody who wants plants, businesses. We tend to just run that until it runs out, but we basically set up a pop-up nursery. We give out bulbs and seeds and plants, and it is wildly popular. I think this year was our 3rd year, and it was a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun. And when I talk about building partnerships, there's a lot of partnerships to be built. This is a drop in the bucket of folks that we've partnered with in the last 5 years. This is maybe a quarter. Like this, it's hard. When they say it takes a village, it really does take a village. So this is just a fraction of folks. We're constantly doing things with people. And that's really a good way to really think about, how do you do your outreach and education components of being a bee city? Well, there's people out there already doing things, right? There are churches who meet regularly, and there are neighborhood associations and schools and businesses, and they all want education. And there's no reason for you to have to create any of that stuff. All you have to do is tag along with their existing events and make it happen. And so, we host workshops and talks with partners all the time because it's kind of low-hanging fruit. You don't have to do much for it. You just, they provide you a nice audience, and then you can kind of move the discussion forward from there. So you don't have to create your own stuff. It can be done for you. Another thing that really helped us out a lot was swag. People like free stuff. We give out, I don't even know how many thousands of packs of native wildflower seeds we've given out. We've given out a lot. So you can buy a button maker, you can make buttons, you can order stickers pretty inexpensively online. I hate to just put cheap plastic garbage out into the world, but I still see people wearing these buttons all the time, and we stopped making them 2 years ago. So, there's a lot of opportunities there to do relatively inexpensive things that seem to have a pretty large benefit to what you're doing. Another thing we did was we created some resources to fill in gaps. And a lot of what we provide is both in English and Spanish. So, there's a lot of great resources out there. There's no reason to recreate them. However, if you see gaps, try and fill them in. And we've had a lot of success with that. And this is just a snapshot of some of the resources we've created in the last few years. Stuff that didn't exist before, stuff that's more local to you, to your place, I think has a ton of value. People really appreciate those types of resources a lot more. And then signage. Signage can be educational and placemaking. It's pretty inexpensive. You can do a lot of fun, cool things with signage. Right now we're actually working on some more larger panels that are going to go into a new development in Uptown Vancouver, where they're going to talk about the native plants that they planted, and then all the pollinators that they're going to help with that. So signage is great. It's definitely a good way to move forward. Lots of sign examples, put signs out about meadows or mason bees or native plants. Like there's tons of opportunity there. And then, of course, the most important sign of all is the Bee City sign. And so last year, 2025, Vancouver City Council voted to be a Bee City. It was unanimous. All of our councilors and commissioners all got together and we're very excited to make Vancouver a Bee City. And then we had our Pollinator Festival as a celebration to that. And so we do have another Pollinator Festival coming up on Saturday, June 20th in Vancouver. You're all welcome to come. It is a free event. We host speakers, we host art exhibits, we have vendors, we have a ton of kid activities. We do some awesome bee walks and native plant walks and garden tours and all of those things. So come check it out, pollinatorfestival.org. It's free. If you want to come volunteer for it, even better. Volunteer signups are open on the website. So check that out. We'll have Olivia Messenger Carroll talking about bees. We'll have Doug Tallamy talking about ecosystems and ecology, and probably butterflies and bugs and everything else. So come check it out. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it is a free event. So just a few things on strategies, and then I'm going to be done here and I'll take some questions. But know how your government works. Figure out who your decisions makers are and figure out, what it's going to take to convince them to make your city a Bee City. Also interview cities of your same size that are already Bee Cities. We did that in Vancouver, and I think it was incredibly helpful, was talking to folks who had made their city a Bee City already. It's hard to find your exact situation in another city, but if you shoot for a city that's about the same size as yours and talk to a couple different cities, you'll probably get there. Another strategy that we found that was really important was go to meetings, go to city council, let people know who you are, make public comment. They're free, pretty quick and easy things to do. And you can also do Pollinator Week proclamations. We've been doing them for years. We did city proclamations, county proclamations. We get the governor to do proclamations every year. They're not that hard to get. Most people, regardless of their political stance, are very pro-pollinator. Like it's not a hard sell on a lot of folks. People are pretty open to pollinator specific things. You're going to need to find a champion in your city government, and this is key. I talked to a city who failed at becoming a Bee City because they couldn't find anyone within city government to make this happen, because somebody's job is going to have to, at least some microscopic portion of it is going to be, administering the Bee City stuff. And so you have to find somebody within government to help with that. And then you have to show them that there's support. So, we did things like a change.org petition and, going to meetings, bugging people, having commissioners bug people. They have to know that there's support. Politically, there has to be political will behind these things. And, politicians are, whether they're at the state or local level, it doesn't matter. If they're hearing 8 or 10 or 12 people who don't know each other saying the same thing, they pay attention to that. And so getting information to them, getting people to hit them from multiple angles, I think is super important. So find your champion. That will be important. Keep it simple and focused. That's up to you as to how you want to do it, but you don't have to go overboard with things. You don't have to include a bunch of different things. This is about simple habitat stuff, pollinatorification. Keep it simple, and there's no reason to do anything other than that. And then educate yourself. There's a lot of programs out there to do that with. The Bee Advocate program at OSU is great. I think it's free still. You just go to classes, you get some resources, all kinds of great stuff. Master Melitology is great. The atlases are great. Those are good ways to educate yourselves as well. So use the resources that are available to you, but make sure and educate yourself, because it will help. It will help when you're trying to explain these things to others, to kind of fulfill some of those educational needs that Bee City requires. Ask Xerces and others for help. That's what they're there for. Xerces wants you to succeed. They have tons of resources. Use them. If you're struggling with something, reach out to them and explain to them what's going on. They might know of another city to point you to ask for help. They might have some resources or other types of support, but ask for help. It will never It's never a bad thing to ask for help. And Xerces wants you to succeed, so use them. This is a big one. And this is more of a realization than a lesson learned, or I guess it's a lesson learned too, but grounds departments do a lot of work. And, a lot of these departments are tasked with caring for the native pollinator habitat that you're putting in the ground. I could talk for a whole hour about this particular subject. Like, I've had so many interactions with school grounds people, with city grounds people, with county grounds people. And sometimes there's a disconnect. They're the ones that have to use the IPM plants. They're the ones that have to take care of the plants. And a lot of them live by the old standard of mow and blow, right? And that's not really always the best thing for a lot of these types of habitat. So you need to make friends with your grounds departments. You need to get them on your side, and you need to come at them with strategies like, hey, what if we throw volunteers at this rather than you having to spend time to manage these sites. You might have to explain to them what flame weeding is, because flame weeding is a cool thing. And once people know what it is, they are way more interested in trying it. If you don't know what it is, Google it. But it's a fun way to get rid of weeds. And if you're trying to manage sites with little chemical input, that's different than the norm. That's different than what's typical for a lot of these grounds folks. And so get to know your grounds department, make friends with them, offer them some additional solutions, because that will benefit you immensely. And then have fun. Having fun is so important. If it's not fun, you shouldn't be doing it. And if you're struggling, think about workarounds. Think about, if you're struggling with your city, talk to your county. Maybe your county's more interested than your city is. I think that's totally an acceptable way to go. So always have fun. So back to those original things happening in Vancouver. I talked first about those chemical placards, and Vancouver could always do better with the chemical use. We've been doing this for 5 years. We're not quite there yet. Things could be better. Clark College unfortunately got rid of 2 of their 3 acres of pollinator habitat, which was kind of a bummer. That's new this year. That just happened late 2025. They still have an acre of meadows, but they don't have the 3 acres that they once had, which is a bummer. Clark Public Utilities, on the other hand, though, continues to meet and exceed people's expectations. They continue to put in new habitat. A lot of it is really well thought out. A lot of great things happening on the Clark Public Utilities end. And then that ugly median strip that I showed you earlier, in 2024, we got to put in an art piece there, and it really is a special thing to me, especially because I get to look at it every day. But it really created a nice placemaking kind of example for our community. We have neighborhood associations that are attached to that thing. We have regular weeding and pruning events there. We do bee talks and nature talks there. But in 2024, we were able to plant it out with about 2/3 native plants and about 1/3 ornamentals. And then we also installed this 13-foot tall indigenous spirit totem. It's a very cool thing. It was created by a local indigenous artist, and it is the centerpiece. Her name is Grandmother Camus, and we did plant a lot of camas bulbs at this site, and we had a really lovely blessing and opening back in 2024 for that. And this is what it looks like today. I walked by there today at lunch. This is what it looks like. A lot of those plants are 2 years old, or they're going on their 2nd year. They're about to really take off. There's a couple trees over there that are just getting ready to take off. And so the space really looks nice. And again, it's helped us build a lot of community around a space and create a really nice thing in a place that was pretty ugly to start off with. So definitely was a good example of bugging people was worth the effort. So, and I'll take questions if there are any.
Kyle, thanks so much for an excellent presentation. I know for me, my in-laws are all living in Vancouver, so I will be sending them your direction rather rapidly. And yeah, anybody who has any questions at all, please throw them into the chat now. I know I've got a whole list myself, but we'll go through questions in the order they are received. Our first one is from Elise. How many people were involved in the beginning, and how about now?
Yeah, so when we started the nonprofit, there was probably four of us, five of us. We had some other partner friends who weren't part of the nonprofit, but were interested and engaged. Um, and one of the things that we realized, we started this and we felt like people weren't communicating, there wasn't much going on. Why aren't more people doing this? And what we found out was that people were doing things, they just weren't maybe talking to each other as best they could. And so as soon as the nonprofit was formed, it really became more of a hub for people to communicate and figure out ways to build community. And you know, I think our board right now has about 10 people on it. We have a dozen or so folks who are regular volunteers. When we put on the Pollinator Festival, though, we end up with about 70 volunteers. There are people in government who have retired who come to we have regulars who come to our events, like that kind of thing. So hard to put a number on it, but it's definitely grown. It's definitely grown. A lot of regular volunteers, and people that I wouldn't have expected. The poor woman who runs the Nature Spaces program, I used to email her all the time with like, why aren't you doing this? Why isn't this better? And she's a great friend of mine now. We collaborate on stuff all the time. We scheme on things all the time. Like, how can we make this better? And it's great. So hard to put a number on it, but the numbers have doubled, tripled as far
Awesome.
as the core, but the ancillary is huge. So
Great. I missed Catherine. Catherine asked, what role, if any, did Clark County play?
very little, very little. Clark County has been more of a struggle to communicate with on these things. They've also had a lot of turnover on their staff, and so didn't do much with Clark County. Although we're talking about maybe working toward making Clark County a B city next, and I think that we have a county council that's open to that, but we're not quite there yet.
Um, just a quick note of praise for you. Kyle won't say this, but he is a force to be reckoned with and tirelessly works for our native bees and our community, um, says Michael. And Marcy asked, how did you get Doug to come out and what did it cost, etc.?
Yeah, so Doug, you can reach out to Doug through the website. You actually get his wife. Doug doesn't email much, but Cindy emails. You have to pay travel costs, and then he has a speaking fee. And the speaking fee is variable. I think for us, it's around $4,000 plus travel. Um, I've heard that depending on the situation, will charge an awful lot more than that, though. So I think it really depends on if you're a business versus a nonprofit, what you're doing, what the outreach is, what the book selling potential is, because he makes money off selling books too, right? So we have a bookseller at the festival to sell his books so that he can then turn around and sign them. And I know that that helps with the pricing and some of those types of things too. So
I found that what you said about the uh, the grounds managers and groundskeepers learning to connect with them was really interesting, especially in context with one of the past talks we've had. Um, with the gentleman. I am spacing on his name. If anybody could help me, from Cornell, who said that one of the largest bee habitats he had seen was in a cemetery next to Cornell. Just an interesting thing that I had. Jordan Kuhneman, thank you. Appreciate it. Just immediately struck that for me. Another thing that I saw that was really interesting was your kind of heat map of habitats in a neighborhood. And I was just interested in how you conduct your outreach and whether it's based off of those sort of heat maps or whether you're kind of just basing it off of an area or on volunteers. How do you generate that kind of outreach?
yeah, so we cover the entire county, and then the city is important to us because that's where the bee city is. We focus on so the city has a lot of demographics available, and statistics available about like which neighborhoods have less tree canopy than others, and it's all based on tree canopy typically. And the central Vancouver neighborhoods where that art installation went in and where I live are traditionally a lot of the lower lower income, lower opportunity, lower tree canopy neighborhoods. And so we do focus on those neighborhoods. There's also a lot of Spanish speaking folks in those neighborhoods, and that's a big part of why we do. If we create a race resource, it's available in Spanish and English. Um, and so some of it has to do with city demographics. Some of it has to do with just the direction our board wants to take things in. Um, but the city has neighborhoods that they focus on, and we also try and focus on those as well because they're underserved and it's important to get resources to them.
Great. I also was wondering about how you generate your funding for some of these larger festivals, just what your avenue is for that.
Yeah, it's a mess. Grant funding. I was trying to figure out, we've been around 5 years. I want to say we've pulled in grants probably about 130,000 over the last 5 years just in grant funding. And that pays for a lot of these things. To put on the festival, it's about a 20 to $30,000 endeavor. We look for sponsorships, we look for grants. The city of Vancouver has a lot of grant opportunities that aren't really available in a lot of other places. So we are lucky from that perspective. When I talked earlier about the reasoning behind like why we started the nonprofit and why the city felt the need to partner only with a nonprofit, that's because they'd had good luck with that. And the city will oftentimes funnel money to nonprofits in order to do the work that the city can't really do. And so we get funding directly from the city. We've also started. We have a retail store on our website. We sell stuff. We don't make a lot of money off of that, but we do make some money off of that. A lot of that money actually gets turned around and goes into programming that I didn't even talk about because we do a lot of stuff with Mason bees and trying to get Mason bee houses in schools and do education on that. The last 4 hours before I came to this meeting, I was talking to high school teachers about how to include native bees and Mason bees in their curriculums, and my brain is just done right now. So, but a lot of resources, being a nonprofit means you can get donations, you can go for grants, and we do have folks that have included us in their estate planning. We have folks that donate to us regularly, but it's any and all. So.
Great. I think my last question here is you were talking about how many people are self-reporting their habitat. What are your current numbers on how many people are kind of self-reporting and how are you tracking that?
We have a simple web form on our website. So if you go to vancouverbeeproject.org/bee-city, there's a web form there that people fill out, and they can opt in as to if they want it added to a map. They can give us pictures of their habitat if they want. So we just do web forms. The reporting it's underreported. Like I track the habitat that our organization helps put in. The city tracks their habitat, and then we're kind of relying on individual homeowners to actually reach out to us and say, hey, I have a 6,000 square foot lot and half of it is natives. We put out a newsletter. We regularly ask people for that when we're tabling, like, hey, we have this thing you should fill out and let us know about what you're doing. I'm sure it's vastly underreported though. I know there's a lot of people doing stuff that just haven't reported yet. So
Great. I really appreciate your answers, Kyle, and just want to double down on what Anthony's saying here, which is, you know, your work and efforts should be commended. Vancouver should feel blessed to have you and your group making it a better place for pollinators and its citizens. And I found this talk really enlightening. I live in Missoula. I'm going to try to use what you told me to help Missoula as well. So.
awesome.
Thank you again, and we really, really appreciate your time, Kyle. Hope everybody has a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next month. Thanks again. Have a good night, everybody.